This video is going to be all about how to more effectively manage construction project defects. The goal of this video is to teach you about the defect management process on construction projects so you can reduce the number of defects on your projects and significantly reduce the overall cost and the time it takes for you to deliver the project. According to research by the Construction Industry Institute, rework due to defects can cost between 4 to 6% of the total project budget. That's why in this video, we'll define defects, so we'll talk about what they are, we'll talk about why they matter, why they're critical to manage as part of achieving project success, talk about the different types of defects, and then talk about the process to manage, eliminate, and reduce construction project defects. So starting off with the definition. Put simply, a defect is any failure to meet specified requirements and standards for the project. A defect is as simple as that. It's any failure to meet the specified standards or requirements. So some examples of typical defects on construction projects. On a road project, we might have poor line marking. On electrical cables, we could have missing labels. In a concrete structure, we could have cracking. In the basement of a building, we could have water ingress, or on structural steel, we could have missing torque marks on the bolt. So these are just all small typical examples of the types of defects you come across on different construction projects. So all of these different items have the same characteristic. They're a failure to meet the specified standards of the project. So we go out, we deliver a construction project. As part of the quality management process, we're checking and verifying that what we're delivering meets the standards, that a defect is any failure to meet these specified standards. The ultimate goal of a quality management system is to eliminate defects, to have zero defects, to hand over a finished project that complies with all of the specifications and standards, and there's no deviations from these requirements. So why do defects matter so much on construction projects? Well, to answer this question, you need to understand the 80-20 rule. If you've ever worked on a construction project, you'll find that managing the works, 80% of the works take 20% of the effort, and then the final 20% takes 80% of the effort. There is always a ton of small items at the end of the project that just consume so much time, attention, and resources to close out. And closing these out successfully is critical to getting paid on time, to finishing the project successfully, handing over to our client. And time again, you see construction projects fail, even though for the majority of the work they've been delivered successfully. However, through the closeout phase, there's all these legacy defects that quickly chew through the project's profit margin. Extending on this, we can categorize the reasons defects matter, and I'm going to explore each of these in more detail down to safety, value delivered, the customer and stakeholder satisfaction, contracts, cost, and time. So the first reason managing defects is critical to managing construction projects successfully comes down to safety. So the origination of any design requirements or specifications that go into the project documents often come from safety standards. For example, the strength of concrete on a bridge is critical to holding up all the cars, traffic that will go across it. If we don't meet those concrete strength requirements, we can't prove that the bridge is actually safe for all those different people to use. If we think of another example, insulation on electrical cables. If we don't have proper insulation on our cables, we could have an electrical fault that could start a fire. So ultimately, through the quality management process, we ensure that what we deliver complies with the specifications and standards, which directly ensures that what we're building is safe for people to operate and to use. A real-world example of this was the Surfside condominium collapse in Florida in the US. So failed waterproofing on the construction of a 12-story building led to corrosion in the steel reinforcement, which the structure ultimately collapsed and killed 98 people. So you can see deviations from the original standard, which was waterproofing of the concrete, led to a legacy issue that caused corrosion in the steel reinforcement and ultimately the integrity of the structure of the building, leading to a collapse that killed 98 people. So when we're talking about defects, we're not just talking about money. We're also talking about an ethical responsibility to ensure that what we're building is safe for use. The next reason defects matter is that The elimination of defects directly leads to additional customer value. Let's think about this. The project specifications and standards document what we're getting paid to build. Ultimately, each of these standards, each of these specifications directly relates to the value we're creating for the customer. So if we have defects in the product we're producing, we're ultimately producing something that isn't as valuable. So eliminating defects ultimately increases the amount of value delivered by the project. This then relates to my next point, which is the less defects we have, the more stakeholder satisfaction we have. So defects will ultimately impact the perception of the project by the client. So even if they're aesthetic and minor defects, we could build something that's perfectly fit for use, perfectly safe to use. However, if it's got a whole lot of cracking in the concrete, scratches on the walls, ultimately the way our client sees it, the way our client perceives it, is that we ultimately haven't delivered something valuable. They've got a poor quality product. So stakeholder satisfaction and defects are also directly related. Next, defects have important commercial implications. So when we're talking about the contractor building the project and they're ultimately responsible for delivering the project in line with the requirements and specifications, this requires them to produce product that is free of defects, because ultimately they're getting paid to deliver what the project specifications and requirements say they need to do. So ultimately there's significant contractual implications through contracts. Defects can impact payment, and they can also impact contract completion. So getting your security back, closing out the project at the end of the job. You see this a lot typically around payment on construction projects. So payment is always an issue on construction projects. Cash flow is the lifeblood of the construction industry, and payment is a powerful motivator. So regularly on projects, you see contractors make payment claims and principals reject the claims, not because they haven't necessarily done the work, but because they haven't done the work to the required standards and they can't prove that they've done so. So the principal is meant to pay the contractor based on the value of work they've completed, and often there's a dispute around valuing this work based on what both parties see as outstanding work or outstanding defects. So defects will always relate to payment on construction projects. This then directly leads on to the next issue, which is cost. So rework ultimately costs money. The cheapest way to deliver a project is to do it once. Do it right the first time, not to come back and do the same task again because you messed it up the first time. So the less defects we have, the less money we're going to spend. Defects can consist of both incomplete work, so work we didn't do the first time because we didn't have the materials, because we didn't have the access, for whatever reason, but also defects can consist of rework where we haven't done the work correctly, so we're coming back and doing it again. Finally, defects matter because they impact the duration of the project. So quickest way to deliver a project, in the same way that the cheapest way to deliver a project, is to do everything correctly and completely the first time. If we have defects, if we have incomplete work, if we're coming back and doing things twice, it's going to suck up our resources and it's going to push out the duration of the schedule. So the quickest way to complete a project is to do it without defects, without rework. Okay, let's now talk about all the different categories of defects. So what are all of the different types of defects that exist on construction projects? So the first one, we can categorize defects based on their cause, whether they're caused by incorrect design, incorrect construction methodology, the wrong materials being used, missing equipment, these sorts of things. So defects can be broken down based on their cause. We can break down defects based on their significance. So are they aesthetic only? Is it paint markings on a wall? Or is it a significant defect that impacts the operation of the asset? Is it a missing electrical switchboard? So we can break them down based on the significance. We can also break them down based on who's responsible. Is it the responsibility of a subcontractor who's done something wrong? Is it because it's an incorrect design? Is it the responsibility of the designers to fix and get an answer to? And then finally, we can break them down by the type. Are they due to incomplete work, which we're waiting on materials to do, or is it because of an incorrect installation? So these are some of the different ways we can categorize and break down defects on a project. So how do we manage defects? We know defects are a problem. We know they cause significant harm to a project's success. What can we do to manage them more effectively? Well, the quality management process ultimately exists to eliminate defects. So through the quality management process, we're directly addressing the presence of defects on a project. Our goal is to deliver a product that fulfills the project requirements. So the quality management process is there to identify and then close out and ultimately try to eliminate defects. So let's look at the quality management process and where defects are addressed and managed through this process. So it starts off with, as inputs to the quality management process, we get the project requirements, the design drawings, and any contract requirements. We then develop a quality lot structure. So this will be a list of all the work we have to do in the project, the same as a work breakdown structure. And against each of the individual construction requirements, we develop inspection and test plans. So an inspection and test plan is a document we use to check and verify that the work has been done correctly. Once we've developed our inspection and test plans, we'll go out and we'll complete the construction works. Against each of the activities, we do our inspection and testing. Where we fail inspection and testing, we record that as a defect, a non-conformance, a failure to meet the project specifications. These go into our punch list. We then work through our punch list, closing out all of the individual defects. And then when we've successfully completed the inspection and testing for some work, we've closed out the defects relevant, we can successfully close out the project work for that portion of the project scope. So that's the quality management system we use to ensure we're identifying defects, recording them, and closing them out, and then handing over a product that's free from defects.